Picture a bus depot. Rows of city buses, baking in the afternoon sun, waiting for the evening rush. Now look up. Around those buses rise 70,000 seats, a sweeping concrete ring of them. Because this bus depot is the Estádio Nacional in Brasília. It cost over $500 million, making it one of the most expensive stadiums ever built at the time. It hosted 7 World Cup matches in 2014. Today, government buses use its parking structure and civil servants fill its offices. The most expensive bus depot on Earth. And here's the thing, Brasília isn't the exception, it's the pattern. Today, while the 2026 World Cup fills stadiums across North America, let's take the tour nobody takes. What happens to these cathedrals of football the day after everyone goes home? Start 2,000 kilometers north of Brasília, in the middle of the Amazon rainforest. To reach Manaus, most construction material came by boat, up the river. Brazil built a $300 million, 44,000-seat arena there for exactly 4 World Cup matches. 4. Afterwards, Manaus has no team in Brazil's top division. State championship matches in the years that followed drew crowds of under 1,000 people in a stadium built for 44,000. It got so bleak that officials floated using the arena as a temporary detention center. The local clubs mostly went back to playing at their own training grounds. The arena stayed, kept alive on public money. Fly across the Atlantic. Athens, 2004, the Olympics that came home. Greece spent roughly €8.5 billion, double the original budget, $3 billion of it on sporting venues. Within a decade, the Taekwondo Hall, the rowing center, the hockey stadium, abandoned. Weeds through the bleachers, graffiti on the podiums. A few years later, Greece was in the worst debt crisis in its modern history. The games didn't cause it, but those rotting venues became its most photogenic symbol. And Qatar, the $220 billion host we covered last week. One stadium there was the exception that was supposed to prove the rule. Stadium 974, built from shipping containers, designed to be unbolted and shipped to a country that actually needed it. A genuinely brilliant idea. It closed in December 2022, ready for its second life. As of last year, it was still sitting there, fully assembled, going nowhere. And Lusail, the 80,000-seat crown jewel that hosted the final. The plan says it becomes housing, shops, clinics, a school. The plan says a lot of things. Plans usually do. So why does everyone keep building them? Nobody involved is stupid. The answer is that a World Cup stadium is designed by a committee of people who will never have to run it. Start with the specs. FIFA requires minimum capacities, 40,000 for group games, 60 for semi-finals, 80 for the final. Host cities don't get to ask, what size does our city need? The tournament dictates the size, the city inherits the consequences. Manaus needed maybe a 10,000-seat ground. It got 44 because that's what 4 group matches required. Then, the bid math. Remember the auction from last week, the winner's curse. Countries win hosting rights by promising the most, and every oversized stadium comes wrapped in a legacy plan. Concerts, tenants, community use, tourism. Legacy plans live in bid documents. Bid documents are marketing. Nobody audits a legacy plan 5 years later. There's always a new tournament to bid for. Then, the construction. Big stadiums mean big contracts, and big contracts attract exactly who you'd expect. In Brazil, the construction giants behind several World Cup venues were later at the center of the largest corruption investigation in the country's history. Executives convicted, billions in bribes across public projects, stadium costs that had somehow tripled between the first estimate and the ribbon cutting. Rushed deadlines don't just inflate budgets, they launder the inflation as urgency. And finally, the day after. Here's the arithmetic no one says out loud during the bid. A stadium is a terrible business. It's a building that hosts maybe 20 to 40 real events a year, sitting on prime land, costing millions annually just to maintain. It works in exactly one case, when a big tenant plays there every other week in a city big enough to fill it. A team, a city, a calendar. Remove any one of those and you don't have a venue. You have a monument that eats money. Brasília's team plays in the lower divisions. Manaus barely has one. The Athens rowing center had no tenant at all. The math was never hiding. It was just nobody's job to look at it after the confetti. Because here's the honest other half. Some of these stadiums live. But first, add 2 more graves to the tour. Cape Town built a gleaming arena for 2010 on the insistence of FIFA's preferred postcard view, over a site the city itself said made no economic sense. Within years, its anchor rugby tenant hadn't materialized. Running costs swallowed public money, and officials openly debated whether demolition would be cheaper than upkeep. And Russia spent $11 billion hosting in 2018. Several of its 12 venues sit in cities with no top-flight club to fill them, kept breathing by federal subsidy programs, a line item politely renamed Legacy Operation. So what separates the graves from the survivors? The Maracanã is still the beating heart of Rio football, because Flamengo and Fluminense play there constantly, in a city of 13 million football addicts. Tenant, city, calendar. And now look at 2026, and notice what's missing. The tour we just took? It ends here because this World Cup didn't build a single new stadium. Every venue, MetLife, SoFi, the Azteca, all 16, already existed, already has NFL or club tenants, already had a life before the tournament and a schedule for the day after. The most expensive World Cup ever staged in stadium terms cost almost nothing new. That's not an accident. After Brazil's ghosts, after Athens, even the people selling the party learned that the white elephants were becoming the story. The quiet fix wasn't better legacy plans. It was stop building, which of course only works if you happen to be a continent that already owns 80,000-seat stadiums. The 2034 host, Saudi Arabia, the auction's only bidder, has announced plans for 11 new ones, including one on a cliff edge and 170 stories in the air. The Graveyard Tour, it seems, is booking new destinations. Strip away the football one more time, and the stadium graveyard teaches a test you can use on any mega project. A rail line, a convention center, an Olympic pool, a downtown arena your city council is very excited about. Don't ask what the building will do during the party. Ask 3 questions about the day after. Who owns it? Who fills it? Who pays to keep the lights on? If the answer to all 3 is a paragraph labeled Legacy, written by the people throwing the party, not the people cleaning up after it, then you already know how the story ends. You've seen the bus depot. Concrete is honest. It stays exactly where you pour it, costing exactly what it costs, long after the promises have flown home in business class. And if your city ever gets the glossy presentation, the renderings, the jobs number, the tourism curve, remember that every ghost on today's tour had one too. Brasília had one, Manaus had one, Athens had a dozen. The renderings always show the stadium full. They never show it on a Tuesday in November, 8 years later, when the only thing moving inside is the buses. That's the graveyard behind the beautiful game. Next week, a different kind of ruin. A company that owned half the phones on Earth and lost it all in 5 years. Nokia is next.